Hey folks, this week saw the conclusion of the Midnight Season 1 Race to World First, with Liquid Guild taking a well-deserved title win and the 4th in a row, elevating them close to being the modern era's equivalent of Paragon or Old Method. Now, of course, the modern live-streamed era is very different to the pre-Battle for Azeroth days, not least in terms of the resources that are available to the big two guilds, and how massive the gap is between them and the rest of the field. But this is nevertheless still a massive moment for the race. With the race only just over and done with, it very much still feels like Midnight is in its early stages, which means that the idea of a new patch being due seems a little bit unbelievable. But it's actually been just over 6 weeks since the start of early access, and so Blizzard's announcement that patch 12.05 will be releasing on April the 21st for North America and the 22nd for EU perhaps shouldn't have been all that surprising after all. This patch will have a heavy focus on open world content, with brand new Void assaults allowing us to defend Eversong Woods and Zulaman from the forces of the Void. And the Naga and Twilight cultists will also be joining the fray, with new ritual sites for us to disrupt. And if you're a fan of fishing, a brand new spearfishing activity may be right up your street. And if you're looking for a brand new twist on PvP, then the new Decker Duel is a prop hunt based group hide and seek minigame where you can disguise yourself as housing Decor to hide out in Silver Moon. And for more performance oriented players, there's brand new gearing features, including the return of bonus rolls for both Raiders and Mythic Plus, along with a brand new bad luck protection system. This will offer Mythic Plus only players the opportunity to get up to 2 Myth Track pieces a week, alongside the one that they get from their vault. And that Void Forge that we've been powering up for Decimus will also be springing into life, and that will allow us to upgrade our weapons and trinkets beyond their current upgrade track caps. I'll be doing a more in-depth look at what's on offer in the new patch next week, so drop me a sub if you don't want to miss out on that. But for now, let's get back to taking a look at that Race to World First. The race itself turned out to be a very topsy-turvy story, in part due to it being the first multi-raid tier since I believe the start of Warlords of Draenor, which in effect split the raid into 2 major phases. The first phase of Voidstorm and Dreamrift was unexpectedly short, being concluded before the first weekend of the Mythic raids opening up, leading to the race being dominated by days of Mythic Plus and Mythic splits and unusually low viewership, along with a background conversation about the game's apparent lack of difficulty. This of course just served to put extra pressure onto Phase 2, the March of Quel'Danas, to deliver on the missing excitement, pressure that Blizzard was clearly aware of, with massive pre-launch data mine buffs to those encounters. The first boss of the new raid did manage to put up a bit of a stiffer fight than its predecessors, clearly signalling that the final boss might just not fall over quite so quickly. And that proved out to be true, with the raid stretching out over the weekend period. Pretty much every Race to World First comes with widespread rumours and speculation about a possible secret Mythic only phase, and this was no different. What was different though was that those rumours this time turned out to be correct, delivering a dramatic moment when the frontrunners Liquid's joy at seemingly defeating the boss turned to shock as that boss failed to just fall over and die for them. Historically, those secret phases have been more of a DPS check finisher, leading to widespread expectations that this would be a mere road bump for the race. But with Liquid failing to take it down on the day, the possibility of a last-minute upset with Echo overtaking them started to seem quite likely. However, this secret phase was ready to offer a bit of a stiffer challenge, and it managed to survive long enough for Liquid to wake up on Monday and finally manage to take it down in what was a truly thrilling conclusion to the race. What the Voidstorm and Dreamrift lacked in terms of excitement and challenge, it turned out that March of Quel'Danas was able to deliver along with more, turning what was widely expected to end up being one of the most disappointing races in modern history into one of the best. Secret phases in the modern era have tended to be damp squib, but Lura's is without doubt the most exciting since Mythic Gul'dan, making it the first truly successful secret phase in the live streamed era. Now, the raid's difficulty and progression curve was not the only major talking point of the race to World First. Predictably enough, the add-on disarmament process also figured in a major way, especially in the eyes of the viewership. Despite predictions by many of the game's top players, including Liquid Guild's GM Maximum, that the add-on disarmament would only serve to further widen the yawning gap between the mainstream player base of WoW and its very high end, I think that many within that player base were still expecting the lack of computational add-ons to take some of the wind out of the race to World First contenders' sails. As it turns out, those rumours of the end of combat add-ons was very much misplaced, with nameplates festooned with interrupt trackers and Liquid on the final boss debuting a graphical helper tool for Lura's memory game mechanic. Something which has left many within the player base wondering what the point of that so-called add-on apocalypse has been. Now, it is worth saying that these new add-on tools are to a degree innovative outliers. It was always going to be the case that this first tier would see the high-end raiding community push the boundaries of what was possible for add-ons, and outside of those extreme outliers, the functionality of computational add-ons remains much diminished in what it has been in the past. While an open source fork of Weak Auras was used for some of these innovations, the core functionality of Weak Auras, which is to provide class head-up display cooldown tracking and group-wide buff tracking, still doesn't exist, not even in that fork. But despite that significant loss of power, it does seem that computational add-ons are still materially impacting the challenge that raid mechanics can provide to players. To make matters worse, at least in the eyes of the player base, Blizzard have failed to deliver on the promise of adapting the raid and dungeon designs to fit an add-on free world. Lura's memory game was originally seen as being the poster child of a mechanic that could only exist without add-ons, only to end up being described by Liquid's Maximum, who is unarguably the best raid leader in World of Warcraft at the moment, as having a humanly impossible time limit, or in other words, a mechanic that required add-on automation to do. Over the years, all of the most egregious computational add-ons have been created in direct response to overly difficult or just overly unpleasant raid mechanics. And frankly speaking, having the very first raid since the so-called add-on disarmament deliver a mechanic that was adjudged as being impossible to do without add-ons is not a great look for Blizzard and their add-on project. For mainstream players, the add-on disarmament has left us with both a less capable but also a less polished user interface experience, with even the default user interface generating bugs and errors. And I am sure I'm not the only person who is now questioning if that whole process has been at all worth it. Which obviously raises a bit of a major question, which is, where does Blizzard take their project from here? There are of course several options available, which stretch between the extremes of at least partially rolling the project back, something that I think would be very unpalatable to the dev team, if not just as it being an admission of failure, right the way to a full-on disabling of add-ons entirely. Now, I would be very surprised if back when the World of Warcraft developers had been planning out their add-on disarmament process, they had not at least considered just going ahead and completely disabling them. But I am fairly certain that having seen the player feedback, they will now be very well aware that they greatly overestimated the player base's appetite for add-on restrictions, and having missed the mark so badly this time around, I think that has for sure poisoned the well for players in terms of being willing to accept any more major restrictions on add-ons for many years to come. From a player standpoint, my own personal opinion is that both the game itself and we players could benefit from Blizzard pausing this process and taking some time to take a big step back and reevaluate what they want to achieve from the add-on disarmament process, and how they can not just deliver on their aims, but do it in a way that is seen to deliver a positive outcome for mainstream players as well. A pause in the process would also free up some time and space for the developers to start catching up and fixing the many bugs and adding a much needed injection of polish into those newly added user interface features. And hopefully they'd also be able to continue to deliver on modernising other parts of the UI and using that as a platform to convince a now rightly sceptical player base that further add-on restrictions can make sense in the future. Sadly though, I personally have some major doubts that this will turn out to be Blizzard's choice. Looking at the plans that Blizzard have been sharing with the add-on dev community, along with the release of knee-jerk hotfix restrictions this reset, it very strongly suggests to me that Blizzard's immediate plan is business as usual, which seems to be to focus on reacting to developments in the combat add-on space while struggling to mop up bugs and address player pain points. My fear is that with the race over and done with, and the focus now moving on to guilds which do not have the privileged relationship with Blizzard that the big three have, and therefore far less to lose, we are going to see the emergence of even more exploit-like add-ons, leading to an effective game of add-on whack-a-mole, which will only serve in the short term to distract the developers away from delivering that much-needed iteration for the user interface, along with providing even more issues for players with add-ons suddenly breaking every other week. And if that type of thrash continues for too long, the end result will be burnout among both the World of Warcraft developers and the add-on developer community, something that will only result in long-term harm to the health of the game overall. Hopefully this is something that is already on the radar of the World of Warcraft team's senior leadership, and we can end up finding some kind of middle ground that works for both players and the WoW dev team. One that will allow the dev team to move on to delivering meaningful improvements to the player experience soon. Midnight's max level gameplay loop has the potential to be the best since Battle for Azeroth, or maybe even Legion, and it would be a great shame to see that being derailed by a misguided doubling down on a project that may not even be deliverable. Regardless of what Blizzard feels about this process, it has not felt like it's been a success to me, or I suspect many of the mainstream player base. And when it comes to entertainment media like video games, those perceptions are often far more important than any reality is. Now, away from the race to world first, and player housing has kind of fallen into the background a bit, while our focus has of course been on all the new content in Midnight. But as things start to die down in that front, I think that housing will no doubt be coming back to the fore, and there's a couple of things this week for housing fans to start to get their teeth into. For the first of those, one of the very minor sore points for housing fans has been the strange limitations in what you could place outside, as it turns out that quite a lot of housing decor items are strictly for the interior only. Some of that was due to performance concerns, for example exterior lighting, but others like structural elements like walls and platforms, these were far harder for players to understand. The good news is that this limitation has been partially addressed, with the announcement this week that over 150 formerly inside-only decor items can now be placed outside, including those all-important structural elements. Now, this does not address the other external decor pain point, which is that painfully small exterior decor limit. But in a response to a question about that, principal designer Jesse Kolanchik revealed that the team are currently monitoring the impact of enabling exterior lighting on the game's performance, holding out the promise that if things turn out to be okay, we may well see that exterior limit being bumped upwards quite soon. Also this week we saw the third round of housing endeavours, with a return of the choice of which one to pursue for guild and charter neighbourhoods. Sadly, the total pool of endeavours hasn't seen any additions, and is limited to the initial 4 endeavour themes, plus the new Silver Moon themed as well. This, I think, is a bit of a shame, as thanks to the vendors for all of the original endeavours occasionally turning up in your neighbourhood, by randomly appearing beside the housing notice board, I cannot be the only player that already has everything from all of the endeavour vendors, and is close if not to being capped on community coupons with very little if anything to spend them on. This means that for many players, endeavours now feel like they're limited to just being a source of housing XP. But even there, I managed to hit the max rank of 9 just this week, without ever seriously farming that housing XP, and I know quite a few people who have been capped for over a month by now. And this is something that runs the risk of the housing progression system in endeavours starting to run out of steam. Now, it is worth saying that we can bank housing XP for future higher ranks if or when they do get released. Albeit, I don't know what, if any, cap there is on banking XP. But that does mean that you will still very likely want to engage with the Endeavour system this month. Now, of course, the next patch, 12.05, is releasing before this Endeavour cycle ends. Currently, housing is disabled on the PTR, so we're not able to see if there's going to be any extra housing ranks to come in the patch, but I certainly hope there are, as storing up XP on the hope that one day we might get more ranks really doesn't hit the same is having ranks sitting there for us to chase. And while it's very nice to log into a patch and get some free feeling ranks, it's also kinda weird feeling as well. What this means is that patch 12.05 is for me going to be a bit of a test of the housing team's progression systems. For me, Endeavours have been the weakest part of the housing system, and if we don't get extra ranks to chase in this new patch, I think I won't be the only person that will start to lose interest in Endeavours entirely. And finally, for this week's news, World of Warcraft's holiday events have this week thrown up a couple of disappointments. The first of those disappointments was the discovery that the Darkmoon Fair's reputation buff still does not apply to Midnight reputations. Last month, this was removed in a last-minute stealth hotfix, something that I think most people in the community thought was likely due to the event overlapping with Midnight Early Access, and developer worries about the player base perhaps getting too far ahead. With that in mind, I think most of us were expecting that the reputation buff would be restored this week, but that has turned out not to be the case, and it's starting to look like it's going to be a permanent removal. This is a very strange decision to me. The Darkmoon Fair buff has existed for over a decade, and in that time it's done absolutely no harm at all. It is just 10% after all. Holiday events have long struggled to feel relevant to players of current content, and the Wii buff was an important contributor to giving us a reason to visit the fair every time it came around. But as it stands now, the fair feels like it's been relegated to just being of interest to players of professions, which I think is a great shame, as all that serves to do is to reduce the amount and variety of relevant open world content to do. And staying on that subject, Noble Garden is the first major holiday to go live after the end of Player Housing's early access. During early access, players were pretty disappointed by the lack of any Wintervale themed decor for their homes, despite a lot of holiday themed decor having been data mined at the time. But the fact that housing was in early access did feel like it was a potential explanation for that omission. But now that we're in general access, and there's still no sign of any decor at all for major holidays, this is very much starting to look like it's going to be a trend, and it's a trend that for me feels like a major missed opportunity. The World of Warcraft team have been investing quite a bit into holidays in recent years, adding better rewards and even gameplay revamps, and housing decor just feels like it should have been a no-brainer for those future reward updates. And that's it for this week's World of Warcraft news. What do you think of the new wave of combat add-ons? Should Blizzard now double down on the add-on apocalypse, or is it time to give players a break from tooltip errors and ever more and more add-on updates? Comment down below. If you found this update helpful, entertaining, or even just plain annoying, then let me know by hitting that like icon. And if you want to support my channel to grow and help me to make more of these videos along with other content, then hit that subscribe button right now before you forget. If you don't want to miss out whenever I release a new video, then as well as subscribing, you can follow me in social media for updates. My link's in the description below as well. I've also started streaming on Twitch on Wednesdays, Saturdays and Sundays, and you can find a link to my channel below, and I hope that you'll be able to join me on my journey of exploration through Midnight. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.